Going to a pre-release and we're gonna play Magic. Hey, it's pre-release time, which means it's pre-release video time, which means it's two-headed giant pre-release video time. You can always count on this channel to have the best pre-release videos and probably the only two-headed giant pre-release videos. So if you're enjoying that kind of content, it really helped me out if you hit subscribe. Like the video because it just helps me being a super small YouTuber. Let's keep this train moving though. Ravnica Allegiance is here and the set looks awesome. And you need someone to tell you what cards to keep an eye out for and help you figure out what guild pairings you want. So let's get into it. If you want the full pre-release run through where I go through each card and I give you a really in-depth look at each guild and the cards that make that guild good, check out my pre-release video in the description below. You know, grab your favorite blanket, make a cup of tea, just snuggle up and watch it. It's probably the longest pre-release video I've made. The Bengals, babe, we are go Browns. I am burning this blanket. You may know there's 10 dual color guilds. Guilds of Ravnica covered 5. Ravnica Allegiance has the other 5. Those 5 would be Orzhov, Azorius, Simic, Gruul, and Rakdos. In case you don't know the new mechanics, Orzhov gives you Afterlife, which means you get tokens when a creature dies. Azorius has Addendum, which means you get bonus value if you play an instant during your main phase. So you have to weigh those pros and cons about if you want to play the card during your turn or your opponent's turn. Simic has Adapt, where you pay a mana cost and you get to put a certain number of counters on that creature. It can be done at instant speed too, which is nice, so it gives you a lot of flexibility on how to use your mana. And then those counters may also activate or trigger other abilities. Gruul is red and green, so it's super aggressive. Their new mechanic is Riot, and when the creature enters the battlefield, you get to choose, give it a +1/+1 counter so it's bigger and more scalable, or give it haste so you can keep applying pressure. And then we got Rakdos, which generally speaking, Rakdos is the most benefited guild out of all 5 of them because it says whenever an opponent loses life, you may play that card for its spectacle cost instead. 2 opponents means double the chances of getting it online, plus a teammate there to help you activate it. Before we jump into anything, Rakdos gets 2 thumbs up and two-headed giant. In case you haven't been to a two-headed giant event, especially to pre-release, how does it go? You get 2 guild kits. You and your partner will each get a guild kit. In that guild kit will be 6 booster packs. 5 Ravnica Allegiance booster packs, and then 1 guild-specific, still Ravnica Allegiance-ish booster pack. In that guild-specific one is also where you get your promo foil, so in case you're looking out for a specific rare or mythic rare card, that might help sway your decision about what guild to pick. But most of you are here probably wondering what 2 guilds should we pick for our pre-release. So I've already said Rakdos is probably the most benefited guild. So I'll just say Rakdos is kind of your aggro color that you can pick. If I look back at the pre-release that I went to for Guilds of Ravnica, the team that won it played Dimir and Boros. So they had the most aggressive guild, which is Boros, and the most control-y guild in Dimir. And that worked out really well because they were able to put pressure in the early game, really scale some big threats into the late game, and if they curved out well, it was really hard to catch up. However, the team that got second went double Boros. So it was a lot of eggs in one basket, but that worked out for them most games because they just applied an incredible amount of pressure to the board and just finished games before anyone even knew it happened. We got third playing Dimir and Selesnya. We again went for the really controlling mid to late game, but our early game plan didn't quite come to fruition. Either way, it still showed me that I think having a well-balanced approach where you have 2 guilds that don't share a color, having a control-y and mid to late game focus and a mid to early is really the best of both worlds and helps make sure that your combined effort is the most powerful. So I'd say right now pick 2 guilds that do not share a color because I think it helps give you that best chance to make the most of your card pool. Because right, you're gonna basically have 12 packs opened in front of you and you're gonna wanna make sure that you can take advantage of all 5 color bombs, removal, any combos of colors, that kind of thing. So if you have someone who can do maybe 3, someone who does 2, or each you do 2 and you each splash a color just to help fill your deck out, make sure that you all have answers for removal and bombs and such. I think playing 2 unique guilds in that sense makes that easier than not and gives you the best chance to make the most of the cards you do open. So let's review which cards are impacted by this being a two-headed giant format, which cards get better and worse, so that you know what you're looking for when you're deciding on your guilds. And with the white cards, there's actually only one that really benefits from it being a two-headed giant format, and that's Smothering Tithe. Whenever a player draws a card, they must pay 2. If they don't, you get a treasure. Basically, two-headed giant, you got 2 people drawing cards, 2 people having to pay, so you double your chances of getting treasures. Blue also doesn't have much here. Remember, everything that says target opponent or target player still only hits that one person you name, which is all blue is really doing in this set. They don't have any all opponents or each opponent type stuff. I mean, you have more targets to get mass manipulation online and steal from 2 potential people, which seems good. So yeah, white or blue, just solo color cards, don't have a whole lot going on here. Moving on to black, I'm always a big fan of asserting your dominance to all players, including your teammate. A great example would be Cry of the Carnarium. All creatures get -2/-2. You, your teammate, both opponents. This can be really good, especially if neither of you is playing Orzhov. Chances are you'll run into some Afterlife. This will really help you just clear those tokens out no problem. Or if you attack in and they block, their creatures that barely survive are now taken care of as well. And it exiles everything, so no more Afterlife. You don't have to worry about that. This card's really good depending on the matchup and the guilds you end up playing. Then there's Ill-Gotten Inheritance. It will drain 2 life from your opponents, but you still only gain 1. Point is though, it's double the damage now each upkeep. That's a pretty big deal, and honestly, it's going to add up very quickly, especially when you see the other cards we have, like Vindictive Vampire, which will also drain for 2 life. You only gain 1, but it's each time a creature you control dies, so you can really find some nice synergies with this. Spawn of Mayhem, which is a mythic rare, but this card is still ridiculous. You have an even better chance to get it down on turn 3, and you get to drain 2 life from your opponents as well. Basically, we're seeing black has a pretty decent amount of additional life drain options, so keep your eye out for that, as well as how Spectacle gets that bit of a bump in Two-Headed Giant. Moving on to Spectacle's other color, we have red, and the first card we'll look at is Dagger Caster, which is great by itself. It's great in the normal 1v1 type pre-release, but it's even better in Two-Headed Giant. Killing off tokens and pinging both of your opponents for 1 damage each, not too shabby. Another card that helps us assert our dominance across the entire board is Gates Ablaze. You can take all the gates from your teammate's pool, throw them in your deck, and then throw this card down to really clear the board, just to make sure nothing survives. Immolation Shaman is a nice rare, and it has an additional chance now to ping your opponents for activating abilities, since it says whenever an opponent activates an ability of a creature, land, or artifact, which means you have 2 opponents that could do it, you now have double the chances of getting to ping them for damage again. And I'll bring up Rumbling Ruin, which is still just a phenomenal win condition, because now it also allows your teammates' creatures to swing in for the win. Remember, it's only your counters that get counted, so chances are your Gruul playing this card or your Simic splashing red to make sure that you can get a decent amount of counters on your side of the board and then open up the floodgates, as it were, for you and your teammate to swing in and hopefully close out the game. Spear Spewer is actually a really annoying card to deal with. Pinging your opponents for 2 each turn now, getting Spectacle online for essentially free, can make this card quite a nice inclusion. For green, Biogenic Upgrade is nice because you can target your teammates' creatures as well as yours if necessary. And I'm just going to say, if someone wants to play a copy of Root Snare, go for it, just on the off chance of stopping your opponent's exact attack for lethal, or if they just have a huge board and they're like, well, swing with everything and we win, and you say, surprise, no combat damage this turn, and then maybe it gives you that chance to swing back for the win. And with Two-Headed Giant being a best of 1, no chance at sideboarding, me and my teammate like to typically have an answer for those weird enchantments or artifacts that you typically wouldn't mainboard an answer to. With Two-Headed Giant, I think it's worth the risk, so definitely consider playing weird cards like this, like Root Snare, so that you're ready for anything your opponent throws at you. Sagittar's Volley hits all your opponent's creatures with flying, so you get to kill their huge threat and then also ping all the tokens that their other teammate has or something like that. Sagittar's Volley is just a really good card in general, and it potentially is even better in Two-Headed Giant. Now onto the gold cards. Remember, Two-Headed Giant is often a grindier format as well, so cards like Azorius Knight Arbiter is a strong card to just get an unblockable damage source on the board, as well as it being a really nice blocker is just a lot of value, especially in Two-Headed Giant, especially in a grindier game. Basilica Bellhaunt makes both opponents discard a card, which can be really solid value. This is still probably one of the weaker XXYY mana type creatures, but I wanted to mention it because you do actually get a little bit more value with it being Two-Headed Giant. If you play Captive Audience, I want to know, just point blank, if you get this card and you play it, please come back and tell me how it went, because I don't imagine it being possible to lose the game if you play this card and it isn't like immediately removed and you don't immediately die. You knock them down to either 4, or the target player that you gave this to has to discard their hand, or you and your teammate each get 5 zombies, so you have 10 total 2/2 zombies on the board. That's kind of a big deal. This card looks hilarious, awesome. I genuinely hope someone out there gets this, plays it, wins some games with it, has an awesome time. Cinder Vines will now ping 2 possible opponents instead of 1. We've seen this again with other cards. It's an enchantment, and it being enchantment removal is really nice because in Two-Headed Giant, again, this is giving you a bit more flexibility. You're not having to risk a card that's only enchantment removal. Here we have a bit more flexibility. Cinder Vines, pretty solid play. Thuriel Absolution knocks down all opponents' creatures with the -1/-1 ability, but only yours get the pump up. Still a great card to keep adding to your board, especially with grindier games. And the fact that you have 2 opponents, that allows you to have double the chances of getting rid of creature cards to make more tokens. I mean, this card will end games for sure in Two-Headed Giant. There's also Azorius Skyguard, which is just a really strong card in general. A 3/3 flying first strike is no slouch, and then giving all of your opponent's creatures -1/-0 is going to make their decision process a lot harder, give you a huge advantage in combat. Just all in all, really strong card. And then, hey, surprise, surprise, Grasping Thrall drains your opponents for 4. You still only gain 2, but taking 10% of your opponent's life total is not too shabby. Last but certainly not least is Rakdos the Showstopper. I don't even know if this is a good idea, but what I will say is it will be memorable for sure. Either your teammate is going to look at you and think, what have you done? Because all of your side of the board got wiped out and your opponent's didn't. Or your teammate's gonna look at you like you're the greatest thing since sliced bread because you just wiped out your opponent's side of the board. Or everyone's gonna look at you like you're a maniac because now everyone's lost their creatures or nothing happened and they're mad that they just wasted 3 minutes having to flip coins for basically no effect. But I promise you that this card will live up to its name and definitely be a showstopper. Whether or not that's a good or bad thing, you'll have to come and let me know. If you play it again, I give you a thumbs up, best of luck. And real quick, there's only a few cards that get worse and they're actually all white. Angel of Grace doesn't help much because if your opponent gets hit, it doesn't stop you from losing life. So you say, yeah, I can't lose the game, but you can still hit my opponent and then my opponent's life can drop to 0. And then if he loses, I lose. Angelic Exaltation means none of your teammates' creatures can attack because if you attack with one creature and then your opponent attacks with one creature, that creature is no longer attacking alone, which means you get no benefit from Angelic Exaltation. It's still a good card, especially if your plan is to go wide and your teammate's doing something else. Hey, that can work. Just saying this card isn't quite as good if you both are planning to attack during the game. And then last but not least is Forbidding Spirit. If your opponents target your partner, they don't have to pay the 2 colorless. So unless there's a reason that they'd absolutely have to attack you, I guess it can protect you or your hand maybe if you're worried about getting attacked and then having to discard cards and stuff like that. But generally speaking, these 3 cards get worse in Two-Headed Giant. Okay, so we went through all the cards. What 2 guilds would I recommend? And after seeing the cards and after seeing how Rakdos has benefited the most with Spectacle, I'd have to say Rakdos and a control-y deck like Azorius or Simic is going to be your best 2-deck combo. So there's your answer if that's what you're looking for. But I'd also say, for example, my wife said, I'm playing Azorius no matter what. And I thought, hey, that's cool. You got a guild you want to play. You got something you're looking forward to. I'm not going to say, wait, that doesn't match the numbers. Let's have a good time regardless. So my wife playing Orzhov is totally fine. And I'm like, hey, you know what? I'll play Simic because I think we should have some control-y mid to late game. I like the color pairing. Let's just do it up. At the end of the day, it's your pre-release, it's your experience. So I would say do what you think is going to be the most fun or be the experience that you want. Or you can be crazy and be like, you know what, we're doing that double aggro thing and both go Rakdos or both go Gruul and just really try and close a game out before anyone knows what happened. Gruul can also be a little flexible too because they have green as one of their core colors so that you can really splash in and maybe have one person go Gruul, splash in some Rakdos cards to be super aggro, and then someone being Gruul and Simic to really have a more mid to late game focus. You could still make it work. I'd also say Azorius is probably the least impacted or the least benefited by this. So if you're looking at maybe what's the weakest guild, I think in general Azorius is just really strong. So I'm not saying get away from it, but if you're looking at I just want some fun Two-Headed Giant synergies or things that I can only do in Two-Headed Giant, Azorius may not be the best choice. Genuinely hope this video helped you out. If you want some more in-depth looks, check out the description again to look at my full-length pre-release video. Put a lot of love and not blood, sweat, and tears, but probably some tears when the camera crashed. That was almost a crying moment. I was wearing my contacts and something got in, that was probably a crying moment. Oh, I stubbed my toe so bad going up the stairs. That was, yeah, so there's a lot of crying moments that kind of happened with that, so check it out. But all in all, Two-Headed Giant is awesome because it, one, just is a great format that you don't get to play very often. It's a great format to introduce that new friend or to introduce someone back into the game. I love it. It's even more laid back and relaxed and fun at the pre-release, which are in general just really fun and relaxing, but Two-Headed Giant is even better in that regard. So if you have a friend who's maybe a little nervous or anxious about it, this is the time to bring them and just have an awesome time. I hope you have a great time with your pre-release. I hope you have some great polls, some sweet top decks, some really fun games. I'd appreciate it if you came back and told me in the comments how it went. I'll definitely respond. If you go back to my other video, I respond to every single comment I can because it's just great interacting with you all. If you enjoyed the video, it would really help me out if you hit subscribe and like the button and such and share it with whoever you think would get any value out of it or entertainment value. Again, best of luck. Thank you so much for watching. We'll see you in the next video. Peace.